Good evening, I'm Scott Robbins, W4PA, and welcome to another episode of Ten-Tech TV. Today we are going to talk a little bit about how a CW paddle works. This is probably for some of the newer hams who have never used CW on the air before and want to understand how one of these works. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how Curtis Mode A and Curtis Mode B keying work and the difference between them and why that is or is not important to you. So the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of a basic description of how a CW paddle works. I think most people are probably familiar with how a basic straight key works, which is one you would just put your hand on the desk and tap da-da-da-da-da-da-da, forming the characters yourself. With a paddle and the electronic keyer that's typically found in an HF radio, you can send perfectly formed dits and dots without having to do that yourself with the straight key. How a paddle is typically set up is you have a connection, which is 3 terminals. This is a ground terminal here in the middle. You have one that's DIT and one that's DA on a 3-wire cable that is then plugged into the transceiver with a stereo phono connector, tip, ring, and sleeve. You've got, of course, I'm going to have to guess, DIT, DA, and sleeve, and ground, one or the other. And when this is plugged into the radio, you press one side of the paddle, and you get DITs. You press the other side, and you get DAs. And to send letters, you move your hand back and forth across the paddle. Now, typically the convention for a CW paddle is to have DITs on the thumb and to have DAs on the fingers. Though there are some people who do use this backward from that wiring. There's no, I guess, correct way to do it, but the conventional way is to have DITs on the thumb, though there are certainly people that do it backward from that. I think that evolved from the old semi-automatic bug keys, because the DITs, which were essentially a spring-loaded assembly, which would go dit, 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 and the DAs were manually formed rather than being automatic. That was always the convention on the old Vibroplex. And once we went to automatic keying, the same thing was adopted with paddles like you see here, called an iambic paddle. Now, one of the things about sending CW with a paddle like this is essentially you want to know how to do it. And essentially the basics of how to do it are to simply move your hand back and forth across the paddle to send characters. Now, if you want to send, for example, a V, you would start with a DIT paddle and end hitting it with a DA. So you would go. To send something like a Q, you would have to move your hand across as you send the 2 DITs, or excuse me, the 2 DAs, a DIT and then another DA. Or a C, which would be da 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 dit. Okay, so the question that often comes up is, people will understand the basics of using a CW paddle and that you can use it to form CW characters automatically. But then the question comes up about what is iambic keyer mode A and iambic keyer mode B? That's a question that we hear quite often. And essentially, I have a write-up here that was done by WB9 KZY that I'm going to do a little bit of excerpting from. This is available on the net, and I will read off the net address for it at the end of this. I'm going to read this from here. The difference between mode A and mode B lies in what the keyer does when both paddles are released. The mode A keyer completes the element being sent when the paddles are released. The mode B keyer sends an additional element opposite to the one being sent when the paddles are released. Now, what that essentially means is many times people would send a C by grasping the paddles. When I said a C before, I moved my hand across the paddle. I went, oops, to send a C. Now, some people learn to send CW by actually squeezing the key like this. And it sends a C because I'm grabbing the DA paddle just ahead of the DIT paddle to do that. Okay, so therein lies the difference between what mode A and mode B is. When I grab those paddles to send that C, in mode A, if I release the paddles during the second DA of the C, the opposite DIT will not be sent to complete it. In mode B, if I squeeze the paddles to send to C and I release my fingers, during the second DA, the opposite DIT will still get sent. And now I'm going to give you an example of that. Okay, I'm going to the menu on the Jupiter, and it is set for mode A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze the paddles to send to C, and then when I send to C, I'm going to release the paddles during the second DA, and I'm going to send a K instead of a C. It's going to send da-da-da, like this. Okay, now, using the same hand motion to squeeze the key in mode B will then send a C, even though my thumb is not on the DIT paddle during the second DA. So here we go. Going to the menu, I am changing the internal key on the Jupiter to mode B. Now, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to squeeze the key, and I'm going to release my hand during the second DA of the da-da-da DIT, and it's still going to send the opposite DIT. That is the difference between mode A and mode B. Now I'm going to enlarge this camera here that's up on top. I'm going to hold this up to the camera. We're going to make this camera big. This is a graphic representation of what's happening between mode A and mode B. The keyer output is at top. The DA paddle is in the middle, and the DIT paddle is on the bottom. Mode A and mode B. You can see on mode B on the bottom, as you release the DA and DIT paddles in the middle of the second DA, it still sends the complete character. While at the top in mode A, it would require you to still be holding those paddles when you reach the second DIT. That is the difference between the two. Now you're probably thinking, why would I care? Why would I want to do it this way? And I'm going to let you know a little secret. 99% of the people that send CW don't do it this way. The vast majority of people that learn to send CW with a paddle did not do so by squeeze keying. They did not learn to do so by squeezing the paddle because it is pretty darn difficult to get proficient at sending CW with a paddle by squeezing the key to send things like C or Y. Like I just tried to send a Y there and I screwed it up. But I can send a Y by moving my hand every time. Of course, to send a K there, it wasn't any better, was it? So, most people move their hand back and forth across the paddle rather than squeeze keying and holding the opposite paddle to insert the characters. I hope that this demonstration has been informative tonight. My name is Scott Robbins, W4PA. I'm the Amateur Radio Product Manager for Ten-Tec. I said I would read off the web address for this. This was found on a website that is home.att.net/Jackson Harbor. Jackson Harbor Press, Chuck Olson, WB9KZY, was the person who had written this, and I Googled it this afternoon and printed it out for use with this demonstration. If you have any questions about this or anything else that Ten-Tec does or we can help you with, please give us a call at 800-833-7373 or visit us on the web at www.tentec.com. For Ten-Tec TV, I'm Scott Robbins, W4PA 73.